after
After
transfer, 13,444,589.
Thanks.
And then account 3, dams and reservoirs. We've got no appropriations this year. So the starting and ending balance is 24,993,729. And Mr. Chairman, that's it for the status report. But I was asked to remind all commissioners to please submit your financial disclosure forms if you haven't done so already. David Ray will probably be emailing out a reminder with that attached. So if you can please get those filled out and returned. They have to be done by the end of the year.
I have a question on that. Were they mailed out already? I've not seen one. That's my question.
Okay, they were attached in the last e-notebook. We've got to attach them to this one, but Chairman Sucre will get those sent out.
Thank you.
Yep.
I brought one in. Do you have it?
I believe we've received 2. I believe yours is 1 and somebody else. I forget who.
Okay.
This is Mark, Mr. Chairman, and just a question on that is, I mean, if you're attending Zoom, there's no expenses. I mean, right? I mean, so there shouldn't be a need to fill out a report. Is that correct?
This is, yes, Commissioner Cott, this is a financial statement that asks you yearly if you have a conflict of interest with any of the projects that are.
I'm sorry. Way off there. Thank you.
You're fine.
Yeah.
That's a good clarification because I think that it highlighted in everybody's mind what we're looking for. And it's, that's what it is. It's just a conflict of interest disclosure.
Yeah, the name is deceiving.
Yeah. So anybody have any more questions for Director Gephardt on the financial status?
Mr. Chairman, I have one.
Go ahead, Mike.
If you're not going to be a commissioner next year, you don't need to send one in, do you?
I think that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. If have we ever had, well, after we talk about some of these other projects that are coming up, I've just was curious if in account 2 we've ever been that low before. We'll discuss that later, I'm sure.
We can have the discussion now, but my guess would be yes. I think it has been taken to a nub multiple times.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Item 4 then, Brandon?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, public hearings. This is a statutory requirement that we go conduct public hearings ahead of each of the construction level 3 projects. Over the week of December 1 through the 3rd, we conducted 6 public hearings for these projects. And most of the meetings, we received no comments. And of the comments that we did receive, all of those comments spoke in favor of the projects.
Good. Any questions or comments on the public hearing comments? Go ahead, Brandon.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next item is the Lance Creek well purchase. And purchase is probably not the right term. It's Lance Creek well sale, if you will. And Riley, could you please admit Lance Creek representatives while I explain what is going on? So we received a letter on November 10th from Lance Creek asking how we could assist them in securing and being able to use a well that the Water Development Commission owns. This all started back in 1995 with a level 1 study. And after that study was completed, it was determined that the existing wells exceeded the EPA requirements for arsenic and radionuclides. And then in 2008, an EPA order was administered. So the commission then did another level 1 study in 2009, followed that up with a level 2 study in 2011. And as part of that level 2 study, we drilled test wells and ultimately a production size well, a 303-foot production size well, and determined at that time that it did meet the EPA drinking water standards. So then in 2012, the Lance Creek Water and Sewer District applied to the commission for a level 3 project. The level 3 project was appropriated in the 2013 legislature, and that total was for $170,000 at a 67% grant, 33% loan. And the purpose of that project was to connect the level 2 well to the existing system. And as part of that, one of the requirements of the project agreement would be that the district would reimburse the state 33% of the cost of the well. That's a standard practice for our level 2 wells. As far back as probably they go. In trying to execute the project agreement, it was objected to by the district because what happens with that 33% of the well, 67% is still in the interest of the water development. So any revenues from water sales outside of the domestic rural use, then the state gets a portion of that water sale. And Lance Creek felt that that would be too much of a burden to them. They rely on those water sales. So they chose not to execute the project agreement at that time. There were multiple attempts. I've seen, I think, 6 or 7 versions of a agreement that went back and forth. Nothing was ever agreed to. Ultimately, the appropriation for that project reverted back to Water Development Account 1 in 2018. So then in 2019, the Water Development Office was contacted by the Wyoming Association of Water Systems asking about level 3 funding for this project and what the status would be and what would have to occur. They were told at that time that the money, there was a project, the money had reverted, and that they would need to have a new application for essentially the same project. We informed them at that time that the project agreement would be very similar to the one that they rejected previously, and then we had not heard anything since that time. And then on November 10th, the office received a letter from Lance Creek asking for assistance or asking what they could do to be able to use that well. So I had multiple phone calls with some board members and some contacts within the district. And ultimately, we presented them 2 options pertaining to the well. One would be that the district could purchase the well outright for the actual cost to construct the well. If you remember, the well was constructed in the level 2 appropriation. And we went back and looked at all the the cost for that specific well. The level 2 did other things. It was a $260,000 appropriation. But we went back and looked and determined that the cost of the well and what they would be required to reimburse the state for would be $33,000. So that would be option 1. Option 2 would be to apply for level 3 funding. And then that would provide the project at a 67% grant, 33% loan, or 33% their portion to pay back. But again, explain that that would still have the same provisions that the original project agreement had. So in some of these discussions that we had, it became apparent to me that I was told that the district would like to investigate purchasing the well. And so that is where we are right now. So we have drafted a resolution that would amend the draft omnibus construction bill that we have in front of us, we'll be talking about tomorrow. So there is an amendment, and Riley, if you could pull up the amendment for that. But essentially what this amendment does is it provides a tool for the Water Development Commission to be able to sell the well to Lance Creek. And it would have to either, we had to go back and change the statutory language, or LSO chose this way, which I think is appropriate. And that would put it in the omnibus construction bill and gives us the authority to sell the well. I just had another conversation this morning with the district, and they expressed frustration with me at the beginning of the conversation. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding of how our agency works and what other things may be involved with them purchasing a well. So I tried to explain that the best that I could, but really what we were saying in our correspondence back to them is, yes, we'll work towards being able to sell you the well for $33,000. If that occurs, then the state has no interest remaining in the well, or the Water Development has no interest remaining in the well. And that then they could hook up to the well and use it. We provided some information to them, and the intent was just to provide the information. It would not be a factor in our purchase agreement, but in all these types of projects, they would have to get the water right in their name. They'd have to file an SEO permit. They would have to acquire or amend their special use lease or easement with state lands, because the well is in state land, and then comply with DEQ and obtain a permit to construct and tie into their existing system. And we just pointed that out. And through this discussion, it was apparent that Susan, who I was talking to, didn't understand that those don't all fall under water development. She was frustrated in the sense that, why can't we just, what other things have to occur for them to use this well? And like I said, we're just pointing these things out to them, that they should have to go do this. But once we sell the well, then we're out. And I think that that is a good option for them if that's what they choose to do. But then they still have to tie into it, tie to their existing system, obtain the permit. And there is some concern about, on their end, about the cost of that and all of that. So then that's about where we left it. And I hope that I explained a little bit of the reasoning to Susan that maybe relieves some of these frustrations. One thing I did offer to Susan would be that I could help establish a meeting between DEQ, SEO, and state lands, just to explain to the district what would have to happen for them to construct and tie the well in, and what all those agencies' requirements would be if they chose to do that. So that is how I'm setting it up, and I will give Lance Creek an opportunity to discuss this further. And
Okay, Lance Creek, go ahead.
I believe you're muted, Lance Creek.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yep.
Yes,
No, I mean, we would, you know, we're very interested in getting the meeting put together with all the other agencies. But yeah, we are interested in purchasing this well. So,
And just for the record, one thing I did explain to Lance Creek is that by proceeding with this amendment, it's not necessarily that they have to do it. It gives us the ability. So it'd certainly be our preference that if we go through the work that we would want to sell the well, but we go in with the understanding that if something were to fail, that this isn't binding them at this point to enter into an agreement. A purchase agreement would come
we like,
subsequent to this bill.
yeah, we like that.
If we could get the EPA and the DEQ and the state land board all workable for us, then we would like to use that well. We would like to buy the well. For the 33,000.
Yeah. Very good. Is Wiley, is that Wiley speaking?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Wiley. Yeah, and thank you for that. And as I mentioned, and I've offered, I can help foster a meeting and participate in it and see what we can do to get all the entities and present all the requirements and get you the information you need to make your decisions.
Okay,
Are there any other questions for Lance Creek? Any other comments?
I think we're good.
So we will be following up. It'll probably be next week at the earliest before we get back to you, but we'll start the ball rolling on getting a meeting set up.
okay.
Do they, excuse me, this Clinton,
Go ahead.
do they already have a well permit for that well?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Glick, there is a temporary water right on the well that is under Water Development's name, and it's just a temporary water right. So they would have to apply to the state engineer for the water right.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does anyone else have comments? Brandon, do you know when this well was last tested or proven? Is it still a good well for them? You feel like?
Yes, it is. This is Wiley. We just got done running another test on the well, what, a month ago?
Yeah.
We wanted to be sure that the test stayed the same as they did when they drilled it before we decided to want to buy it. So that testing's all.
What did it test at gallons per minute?
55 gallons a minute. We ran it for 7 days, I think.
That's a good well. That's a good one. You're getting a heck of a deal. You couldn't drill a new well for that at all. Any other comments?
No,
No, I don't have it.
Any comments from the commission? Brandon?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this item and the next item are part of a combined amendment. And we'll have to take action on it tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Wiley. Any other thoughts or comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I just reemphasize that we have done this in the past, and this is in fact the way we have completed those transactions as well.
Good to know. Good information. Okay, so Brandon, do we move to item 5A then? What, your amendment?
That would be great, Mr. Chairman. So the agenda item that I'm adding is the Sheridan Area Water Supply Transmission 2020 project. Originally, we appropriated money for this project for the sponsor, the Sheridan Area Water Supply Joint Powers Board. The city of Sheridan then applied to the State Loan Investment Board for the match funding for the project. And then there became this question of who owns the project. And so this came to light. This has been in the works for quite some time. We just received either yesterday or today, essentially concurrence from both the city of Sheridan and the Sheridan Area Water Supply Joint Powers Board in the form of a letter. And they will also be providing a board resolution that they are in concurrence that they would like to change the sponsor's name on our project appropriation from the SAWS Joint Power Board to the city of Sheridan. And they also concur that the city of Sheridan owns the project. So what we have prepared is a draft amendment again, and it's part of the same one that we just discussed with Lands Creek, that would amend the prior appropriation to change the name from the Sheridan Area Water Supply Joint Powers Board to the city of Sheridan. And I do believe that Sheridan was going to participate. Is there any comments from Sheridan or the SAWS Joint Powers Board representatives?
Any comments or discussion on this? Changing the name, ownership, I guess, of this project.
They are joining now.
I see Dan Coughlin and Dan Roberts. Do either of you guys have any comments that you'd like to provide? If you're trying to talk, you might be muted. And if you're on your phone, you might have to hit *6.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? This is Dan Roberts with the city of Sheridan.
We can hear you.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
This is Dan Roberts with the city of Sheridan, and Director Gebhardt. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? This is Dan Roberts with the city of Sheridan. I seem to have a delay on my voice.
If you have the live, if you're streaming the meeting, you might mute that stream and just talk to the meeting. There's a little delay if you were live streaming it.
I seem to have a delay on my voice.
Well, we can hear you loud and clear.
Dan, if you're watching the YouTube video, if you turn that off or mute it, then and stay in the Zoom meeting, you should be better.
Okay, how is that?
That's better.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I sincerely apologize, but Director Gebhardt explained the situation very well, and yes, the city of Sheridan is the owner of the project and the asset, and that came to light after the prior appropriation. So we're just respectfully requesting a transfer of or sponsorship from the SAWS Joint Powers Board to the city of Sheridan as the owner of the project, and so requesting an amendment to state statute that would allow that. The project is very much the same as it was appropriated previously, and we'd like to move forward under those conditions.
Okay. Any comments or discussion regarding the ownership of that?
Mr. Chairman, I see Dan Coughlin is on. He's with the SAWS Joint Power Board, but Dan, if you're trying to talk, we cannot hear you.
Oh, no, I didn't want to talk until I was asked to. SAWS originally applied for this under its name, under the thought that because we were connecting to a SAWS main on one end and a SAWS main on the other end, and the line wasn't going to exactly follow the same path, that we would be qualified under the rules. But apparently that's because we were unaware of other things that made that more complicated. So we didn't do that. We were perfectly willing in the beginning for the city to be the sponsor, and we still are. So whatever we need to do to meet the requirements of the WWDC and SRF, we're more than happy to do that. So this transfer is perfectly acceptable to the SAWS board.
Okay, any questions for us Sheridan folks? Any comments? Back to you, I guess, Brandon.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we'll take action on that proposed amendment at tomorrow's meeting as well. It'll probably be one motion for the entire amendment.
Okay.
And
or any more discussion on what we called that one was 5A, the addendum to the agenda? If we have no further discussion on that, and Brandon, are we ready to move to 6?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, providing a couple of recommendation updates. We have 2 projects from the last meeting that at that time were the amount of appropriation to request was left as a to be determined. The first one was the Lake Hattie Full Utilization Study, Level 1 project. If you remember, this project is basically being held up in court. We started this recommendation, I believe, in the May meeting, and we'd kind of been kicking the can down the road, just hoping that something would break free and it could help us to determine what the scope of services would be for a project. We just had an update early this week or late last week from the district, and essentially what we're hearing is that the case will be going back to court, that nothing has developed since the November meeting. And so our recommendation for this project, and I think we discussed this at the last meeting, my recommendation is for $250,000 for the project. And this project would essentially be a placeholder that once we get some direction from the courts or some decisions have been made, and we can determine what a scope of work would be, and that the parties are somewhat agreeable to looking at it, which I think they will be, then we wouldn't have to wait for the next legislative session to create the appropriation. We would have it sitting there. So this would be just a placeholder in the amount of $250,000. And I would stand for any questions on the Lake Caddy full utilization study.
Any questions, commissioners, for Director Gephardt on that? Hearing none, maybe we move to LaPrel?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We're all familiar with this one. The biggest question is, what are we going to recommend for an appropriation to move forward? We've had several meetings here very recently, and as recently as yesterday, with the consulting firm. I'll get into some of those discussions and how we perceive proceeding. But in the short, our recommendation is going to be for $500,000. And really what we would be looking at in the project, we're kind of at a leaping off point, one way or the other. We can continue pushing forward with design and try to get design going as far as we can. The other thought is how are we going to fund it? Where's the money coming from? And if we get additional funding from federal or some other entity, how does that influence the design criteria, the environmental permitting, among other things? So what will the funding requirements mean to the project versus continuing with the design as we're trying to develop funding? So our recommendation is to use this $500,000 on kind of a task, a by task contract where the scope isn't really well defined, but the intent is to go out and try to figure out what funding is available and work towards securing that funding and what that funding will fund. Will it fund design? Will it fund the environmental analysis? Will it fund construction? And try to go get as much funding as is available for the project. And as we go down that road, there's likely to be some technical needs, whether it's a little additional design. Do we have to go do a little bit of environmental work to apply for this or secure funding? So as we're going down this, it's nice to have the project team as kind of a liaison to provide this information as we go try to secure this funding. This is a big price tag item, and we're kind of under the assumption right now that it may be too much to ask the state legislature to fund this project in its entirety. So that's, plus we think it's worth the due diligence to go out and try to find additional funding. So given that, our recommendation is to use the $500,000 to see what kind of funding and try to secure as much funding as we can. The consulting team has identified some. We've had some communication with some of the different entities. And one of the components is that still needs to be done. And we're going to utilize the remaining budget that we have currently in the contract to do some additional risk analysis on the dam. And this will also help inform how should it be operating, how could it be operating, and what are the risks to what we have now. As you know, the dam is under fill restrictions through the state engineer's office, kind of help inform whether those are the right elevations or if we need to modify that. or if there's something else we should be doing, because it is a big safety liability right now. So kind of two prongs is to continue with the risk analysis and also request $500,000 to try to get down the road of funding it. And I think I'll stop there and ask for any questions. And I see Pete Roush with Respect is on the line. If we have any questions for him, he may be able to contribute some.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Purcell,
Go ahead, Commissioner Purcell.
did I understand correctly that this 500,000 and the 250 are in the profile you offered for the 517,000 left?
That is correct.
So you've considered that in your financial status report.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So that would, if we earmark that, that leaves us a negative balance.
No, Mr. Chairman, the balance that I stated earlier, after the omnibus bills of 517,000, that would include our recommendations of 250 for Lake Hattie and 500 for LaPrelle. So if those, so 517 includes those recommendations.
Thank you. Any other discussions other than LaPrelle? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, I just can't stop myself. I still believe, and I know I'm out there in the wind, but I still think that this qualifies in an emergency under our emergency program.
Any other discussions about that? It's a threat to Douglas. It's a threat to landowners. What else? How else can we make that argument, Commissioner Purcell?
Mr. Chairman, I tried it and I was unsuccessful, but I worry about our emergency program, that we're in a situation that to access this money, you have to have the failure. And I disagree with that. I think this dam is over 100 years old. And I think it should be, in fact, considered an emergency. Now, having said that, we don't have much money in the emergency fund to do it, but the reality of it is, I'm nervous about that emergency fund and how we're ever going to access it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting who gets to make the decision on whether the dam is well, I guess an engineering company makes that decision. They've already given us information about that and they're pretty concerned. I'm glad that we have taken the approach and the opinion that we have, because it now pushes it to the legislators and Select Water to see if they agree. And if they don't, we kind of, if something happens, our hands are kind of washed clean of it.
Mr. Chairman, I failed to mention it, but there's also discussion among the consulting team, and it goes back to the road of the design and the thought that progressing the design as quickly as you can without knowing what the funding is another way to think about addressing the immediacy of it. So that when you end up, wherever we end up on the other end, we have the design progress as far as we can. They looked at it from that perspective, and they provided a number of approximately $1.6 million to continue with design to get them through another year. So they're basically saying that they could spend $1.6 million in 1 year on geotech work, there's some environmental, there's some public involvement. But to keep the design progressing at as fast as we can too, that if that were the critical path, that they would have to ask for roughly $1.6 million to get them another year of design.
That's pretty expensive, but ultimately, to rebuild that dam, are we talking 30 million? Are we talking more than that?
50 probably.
We're more than 30 million.
Are we
I
Are we-
think
100?
some of the discussions we're having, I think it'd be safe to say we're in the 50 to $80 million range.
I see. 1.6 million doesn't seem like that much to get some engineering
That's what I
started.
thought.
Sorry,
And
Siri needs to help us there.
and I would say that the 1.6 million, that's not final design. That's just enough design money to get another year done.
Yeah,
Roughly, we're probably looking at $6 or $7 million for final design. Is that
I think they mentioned 3.5 to 5.5 for design and permitting.
for design and permitting?
But
So
there's potential.
6-ish million. I mean, we're looking at a significant amount just in engineering and design.
and the Bureau of Reclamation, Jason, will jump in and help us, or are they kind of in the way?
The Bureau of Reclamation is not involved in this at all.
At all?
It's not their facility. It's a private facility. And so they are not involved. We've done a lot of, or some investigation on potential funding sources. There's some FEMA money. There's the potential for congressional bill, the word of bill coming out of Congress. I hear that that's moving again. There's some potential there maybe for some funding. There's a few options. There's not just anybody's going to cut a check for a dam right now, but there is some potential to be looking at.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Purcell,
Go ahead.
is LaPrell or anyone made our delegation aware of this?
The two roads.
Our two senators and our representative, that if the bill in Congress does proceed, that they could work this in there.
Yeah, we have been working with some staffers and they are aware of LaPrell and some of our other projects.
Okay.
Thanks for all you're doing to help them. This is a big deal.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would ask that, given this discussion, our recommendation is 500,000 for the process that we discussed, but is it the commission appetite to consider a larger amount to keep the design going?
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I have the appetite, but I don't think we haven't got enough to provide the meal. If we've only got 517,000 in account two.
The only other option is we do have money in account one. But that's, one of the things that helped lead to our recommendation was the thought that it's potential that some of this funding could go towards design, could go towards the environmental analysis. So from a cost perspective, we felt that maybe looking at the funding first to see what we can get funding for, rather than the state ponying up right now and doing it all, might be better served to analyze this and then use state money from any matching money that's required.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mike.
Part of me thinks that funding sources are going to be more interested in permitting issues than they are design. If we can show them that in fact this project can mitigate any environmental impacts and perhaps qualify for a 404 permit and everything else, that all the permitting's in place, I would think that should help the financing. But I don't know. I typically, I would, as I recalled in the past, we had to have a pretty good layout of the environmental issues and how we were going to resolve them in any application for federal funding.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Commissioner Wagner.
Brandon, have this natural bridge aspect as a historical monument, is there any monies? I know that they like to fund things like historical monuments like that. Would the jeopardy of that have anything to do with getting some funding? Has that been looked into?
Mr. Chairman, no, that not to my knowledge, but that's a good thought. And going back to Commissioner Purcell's, I think one of the things that may open up additional funding for this project is the safety and risk aspect of what we're dealing with too. So it's not like building a new dam, where I would agree that environmental is probably the first and foremost, where we're saying safety is maybe more priority at this point.
And as I understood our previous presentations, that this should not be a difficult project to permit. We're just moving downstream. But
That's, I think, the assumption by the team at this point.
I kind of got a question that's way out to the left. Is the Biden Green Initiative going to play into this at all?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we know at this point.
Okay. They tore out some dams up in Teton County that were only 11 years old. It was crazy. And they've had some, it's been detrimental to the soil and the canyon and everything else. But that one cutthroat fish made it through and was upstream, and there was the justification. So, hey, that's a tricky one. We got a tricky one here, guys. Let's keep praying for Brandon that he can get information and keep sorting it out, him and Jason and all the rest of them that are involved.
It's Mr. Chairman, it's a team and involves a lot of our staff as well as a big consulting team. And I do want to give the consulting team credit. They've done a lot of work on very short time frame to keep the ball going. So I think my biggest mission is to keep the momentum going as well as I can and try to make the right decisions as we go.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think we should sleep on the idea of $1.7 million from account one to see what my immediate reaction was no, but I think I want to sleep on it a little bit, think about it. We might have some of that discussion tomorrow. If any of the rest of you want to talk about that.
Mr. Chairman, Pete Roush with Respect. I don't know if we have any questions for him at this time, but he is available if you do.
Any questions related to engineering? What does I have one. What does the 1.6 buy us? It doesn't buy us the ability to go up there and anchor some of those rocks and have some kind of a 24-hour, 24/7 monitor on the whole thing. What does the extra money help us with? Is that too hard of a question?
Mr. Chairman, that 1.6 is really geared toward, more analysis on the ground, and ultimately furthering the design, going into, getting into conceptual design. What we've done so far is pretty high level, and there's a long way to go to get that to the end. So moving that forward, a big chunk of that would be in geotechnical analysis. We're looking, with where we came out, looking at a new dam downstream as one of the top possible options to further explore that area, really thoroughly explore that, with geotechnical investigation. That would be, almost half of that 1.6 would be in that, but then ultimately just continuing to move things forward with that design. Your comment about monitoring, we haven't considered anything additional. We do have some monitoring out there through a contract directly with the Laparelle Irrigation District they've paid for. The purpose of that monitoring that's out there at the time it was installed was not as an alarm, as an alert system, but more as we put them on the cracks out there just to understand, are things fluctuating? What is the behavior? But we're certainly not set up for, any kind of alarm with that monitoring.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
If we do come up with the additional 1.1 million, I guess it is, right? Or is it going to be?
It would
be 1.6 plus the original 500,000.
Yeah, I think it'd be more along that. We could probably massage that somewhat to reduce it.
Well, this is very important to me. So would in fact this investment allow us to move faster after a year toward the ultimate resolution?
Mr. Chairman, there's a little bit of I think a little bit of a dance with the design, and to some extent that the design can be influenced in some significant ways by the ultimate funding agency or lead agency on this and how the permitting goes. And so, moving the design forward, we have to keep that in mind. But doing that, furthering that design in parallel with this effort to really pin down, a likely funding source and understand what that is, that'd be important. And if everything falls into place right, that the effort that goes into the design, once we do acquire additional funding, from a federal agency, we're that much farther ahead. That would be true.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So everything we would be doing how am I going to word this? Everything that we would be doing would not necessarily have to be repeated later. What you're getting to is the additional money gets you to the final conceptual designs and cost estimates.
Mr. Chairman, we do have Corey Foreman from HDR on the line, and he may want to jump in. But I'll say that this 1.6 we're talking about does not complete that conceptual design. That's it's more along the lines of critical path, what can be done here in the next year, but does not get to, you know, a final kind of 30% level conceptual design. It doesn't get us all of that yet.
Mr. Chairman, one more.
Go ahead.
I don't know how to say this delicately, but are we paying for things with that money that may or may not be useful in the final design?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good question. That's part of that. That's where we would have to be, you know, very careful and diligent in understanding, like I mentioned, you know, what is our most likely funding source and what would their requirements be, and so that everything that we are doing in parallel with that is as close to in adherence of where we think this is going to go, so that there is not you know, redundancy going back on anything. And that is something that the team has been very careful with so far in making sure that we, you know, don't go too far in one direction. And so there, you know, there is some chance there, you know, depending on how things play out. But, you know, that concern would be, you know, foremost in how we proceed.
One more, Mr. Chairman, then I'll shut up. How much of the 1.6 would go toward geotechnical work necessary for final design?
Mr. Chairman, it'd be about half of that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, again, I think I still haven't landed myself, but maybe this would be something we should consider tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question of the team. I threw out 1.6, and that's based on recollection. Pete and Corey and crew, could you provide me with what that number actually is, if it is different, before tomorrow?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we can follow up on that, Brandon, after this. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be right now.
Sure.
And following up on that question, you know, we're looking for an exact number, and we're looking for what the job description or what it looks like. Where's it? How much for geotechnical? How much for other things? How much helps us in the future? How much solves the problem, or doesn't really solve a problem, but gets us through the next little while? Not a very clear question.
Mr. Chairman, I see Corey Foreman jumped on. He might be able to shed some light on this as well.
Mr. Chairman, this is Corey Foreman with HDR. I can weigh in just and add a little more detail just to clarify. Brandon, you are correct. The funding that we had talked about was at a $1.6 million. That is to advance towards the conceptual design. We have mapped out a road that takes us through and put a cost estimate to conceptual design, really at the 30% design level. So really beyond a normal conceptual design. That full cost towards that 30% design was about $3 million. In order to advance the project in the most efficient manner moving forward, the way you had described it, Director, was for the next year was at $1.6 million. So to clarify, you know, to respond to Commissioner Purcell's statement, that $1.6 million is directly applied to that $3 million. It doesn't, if we ask for that now, that comes out and comes right off that $3 million estimate. So And the technical team of dam designers have set up a path where they think that is an efficient way to move forward without having to repeat efforts down the road. So we know enough now about, for instance, part of that is to do the basis of design, where they think they can design or set the design standards, even though there is some uncertainty around, will it be a Bureau of Rec design standard or a Corps of Engineers standard, where you can establish the final design procedures in such a way that you will not have to do work later. So that number is 1.6. We can break that down into those bins, Mr. Chairman. However, and provide that to Brandon in the next day. Site characterization and geotechnical at around 800,000 is the largest single item underneath that. There is a component for a permitting strategy, as Brandon mentioned, to work with and do initial consultation with those agencies to make sure that we are ready to hit the ground running for permitting if and when that funding agency is identified and we can move forward. There's a small component for stakeholder engagement to make sure that we get the needed support when we go into the permitting and ask for other funding. All of this work is really centered around trying to compile the information needed to put into those funding applications. So then the last bin is really around the design standards and advancing the conceptual design that we have been working on for the last, few months since we established the preferred dam option being the RCC dam immediately downstream.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, for Brandon or for Brandon Gephardt or for the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one.
Go ahead.
I guess I would like to ask how much we've already appropriated for this design, and what would it take besides the 1 million to get it to full design stage?
3 million.
Is the total 3 million with the 1.6?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that I believe we had a $650,000 appropriation last year. And prior to that, we were working off a level 2 study, and I forget what the original appropriation of that was, but that, how much? 290. Roughly 300,000, and that was for other things also. So let's just say 650 plus whatever we do today. And if I understand my previous conversations earlier, I think the team has estimated that final design costs are upwards of 6 million. Is that correct, Corey? The 3 million.
That's correct, yes.
The 30% design, and then 6 million would be the final design estimate.
So with this allocation, we would roughly have close to 3 million into it, correct? And 3 million yet to serve to final design. Is that what I'm saying? Close?
I'm sorry.
In rough number? Is that?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, that from today moving forward to complete final design is $6 million. That's on top of the 650 that we've already appropriated.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I think what we're cogitating today is, A, are we going to ask for any more additional funding out of account 1? 1.6 million for 1 year, or approximately $3 million for the completion of the conceptual design. The question that keeps entering my mind is how much of a gamble is it to invest this money and ultimately find out that we can't afford to construct it? So that's what I need to think about. Is there a chance that this is not going to be built and we've invested $3 million without any final result.
We've been wrestling with the same question.
So when I drink my scotch tonight, I will be thinking about this.
You're going to base it on that, huh? We've had a good discussion on this. We each
We
need
need
to,
to know what kind of scotch.
welcome, Senator Anselmi. That's a fun comment. Way to go. Mike?
Thank you. I have some lava glue in my garage that Bernadine made me order, so I'm just trying to figure it out.
Okay, so any other questions or comments?
I'm glad we had the discussion.
Yeah. Thanks for staying with us, everybody, and thinking about this. It's a big deal. Back to you, Brandon. Where
Okay.
you'd like to go from here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item on the agenda is number 7, small water project program guidance document. This was kind of a quasi request. The select water committee made a recommendation, but it was a good idea. And the idea was to develop a guidance document for the small water program. This would be a tool that would be used both internally and could be shared externally so that everybody's aware of how we analyze these projects and how we come to our decisions. And it just kind of spells it out as to the process that we go through. So we provide this document to you, and I know that it wasn't in the original e-notebook, but my thought in doing it today is to basically provide the commission with the document. Select Water will also get the document. But my thought is to take it today. I'll run through some very high level, digest it, and then maybe we can discuss it in March and address any comments or concerns that we have in it at that time, and not try to shoehorn in all of our comments today. One of the things that I wanted to point out with this document, there is some draft legislation from Select Water that will be coming out pertaining to the small water program. And so I have tried to encapsulate what the draft legislation, at least the way I interpret it, into this guidance document to either help the bill or maybe to help us accomplish the same thing that the bill's trying to do, with maybe not necessitating a bill. So the bill draft that is on the Select Water Committee's website does two things. The first thing that it does is looks at a single facility where a sponsor applies for and gets a grant to do some work on a single facility. In certain circumstances, under the way we have looked at this, and I believe it's tied back to the criteria, that it makes it difficult that even if we didn't allocate $35,000 to a specific facility, say for example, we allocated $10,000 to address a structure. The way the wording of our criteria, I believe right now, is that it makes it difficult for us to say that they can come back for a second application and apply the remaining of the balance of what would be a $35,000 grant on the same facility. So we've tried to address that in this guidance document, and it would be on page 7 under bullet 7 of the document. And what we have what we have said is rehabilitation of a structure that has already been rehabilitated once. Program criteria limit projects to a one-time construction, and I don't even have the, oh yes, I do. Construction of a new project, a single rehabilitation of an existing project, or eligible subsequent appropriations, provided the total grant doesn't exceed $35,000. So that last part of the sentence is basically what we added to what would be described in criteria. And I think that accomplishes what, at least the way I interpret what they're trying to accomplish with the draft bill for that component. And I think it's probably a good idea that I think one of the things that sponsors run into from time to time is to develop their matching money. They may only get $10,000 matching money in a given year. And so they use our portion to address part of the deficiencies of a structure and then come back with, when they're successful, on additional money and address the other deficiencies on the same structure. And I don't think we have a problem with that. And I still think that as long as we're not exceeding the 35,000, that it fits within the intent of the program. So that was one of the major things that we tried to encapsulate in the guidance document. The other portion of the legislation, as I saw it, has to do with a public work statute. And really what it boils down to is that a public work project requires, at the completion of it, requires a 40-day advertising period. And they have to advertise 3 times in the newspaper and wait for any material liens or liens against the project to come forward. That's really the intent of it. There's been some discussion, do small water program projects or projects, that was hard. Do they really constitute or qualify as a public work? So I think that we can work with Select Water to come to a resolution on how we can handle that as well. That currently is not in this draft version of the guidance document, but I think it's something that we can work together on.
Any questions or comments on the small water project verbiage? And I sure appreciate all the work you've done on this, Brandon, and the AG's office and others. Mike, and it's a big deal.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that I read the document, but I'll give all the kudos to Jody Pavlika and Barry Lawrence. They've done a lot of work on this.
Thanks, Jody and Barry. Any other comments or discussions? I see Mike Purcell wants to.
Sorry. Do you have, right now, are you requiring the publication that they're trying to get around?
We are, Mr. Chairman. That is a requirement of it. In the last legislative session, the legislature amended chapters, Title 16, chapter something, that put more definition as to what a public work actually was. So that could really, and I had the language here somewhere. But I think it would help these projects as not being public work projects, which should exclude them from that 40-day advertising period. I don't know that a lot of these really fall under the intent of what I think the 40-day advertising period should be.
Okay.
So I don't disagree with the proposal.
Okay.
Any other discussion or comments? Okay, hearing none. Brandon, next item.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, item 8, a demo of practical application of GIS tool developed for watershed studies.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave
Oh,
that,
sorry.
can I go back to this page 9 on priorities? Project curriculum. I'm having trouble with limited funding analysis.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab. I see Jody is still with us too, so she may have to jump in and bail me out. If you remember last couple of meetings, we've had some discussions on this.
Okay.
And so this is our attempt to capture what we heard from those discussions. And if you remember, we put each project into a priority number. And so say that we had limited funding and we could fund all of the projects that have a priority of 1 through 3. We could fund all of those. Then we get into a priority 4 and we can only fund a portion of those projects. So the guidance document, the way it's written now, says that we would fund none of the level 4 projects, only the level 3 projects. And then anything left, any revenue left or appropriation left over would carry over to the next year. They could reapply for the project. They could take a step back and get it shovel ready, and then it moves to the top of the list.
Yeah.
That's the thinking behind that.
Good. And I appreciate the last sentence there. The commission may take into consideration a sponsor's existing backlog of previously funded. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon, item 7, 8.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I will turn this over to Mabel Jones to set it up, and I believe Mike Han will provide a little presentation.
Right.
Mabel, you on? There you
I
are.
am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Good to see everybody this afternoon. Good afternoon, Director Gebhardt, Chairman Lancaster, and members of the commission. I'm Mabel Jones with the Water Development River Basin Planning Team. And I appreciate you all including this topic on your agenda for the workshop. So this data demonstration originated from work completed on a couple of previous watershed studies that were sponsored by the Sublette County Conservation District. The work was done on the New Fork watershed study and also the Big Sandy watershed study. Wyoming Water Development Office staff and the sponsor had hoped to give this presentation last March when the Big Sandy watershed study closeout memo was presented to you. But given that the meeting was virtual, they decided to postpone with the hopes that we would be seeing each other in person, but that hasn't happened yet. So in light of that, the River Basin Planning Team has been reviewing this work, which was completed as we launched into current watershed studies. And then as we were also looking at the Hoback watershed study application. And this review really had us excited to see how the Conservation District, the consultant team at Rio Verde, and Julie Gonzar, the office project manager on the Big Sandy watershed study, worked to develop custom tools for the district to have quick access to water rights. This tool really works as an extension of the Water Development Office's data model, which follows our data standards and extends the utility of the data. So we really recognize the good work of the project team on that Big Sandy watershed study. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Mike Hen, the manager at the Sublette County Conservation District, and let him introduce you to the team who put this together and provide you with a demonstration and discussion of the water rights tools. So Mike, are you there?
I am, Mabel. Thanks,
Yeah, thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman and the rest of the commission for allowing me to give this presentation. I've got Michael Jackson with Rio Verde Engineering in the room with me as well. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this all works well. So hopefully everybody can see the screen. The reason that, well, it started in the New York level 1 watershed study. The team which Rio Verde was a part of and Tetra Tech was another consultant, wanted to develop, we seen a need with ePermit being, it's a great database for water rights research, but it wasn't, it's not very usable for the common landowner or the general public to be able to navigate and look at their water rights. So the team developed this tool through GIS that mapped all the points of diversion, and the Big Sandy added the place of use. We stepped it up in that watershed study. And basically my goal after the new fork was, I really would like this to get to our constituents that we're doing these watershed studies for. And so we thought, what better place to put it than try to aim to get it onto our county map servers. And most every county in the state of Wyoming has that GIS reader on a web-based viewer that allows anybody to access and look at. So the demonstration I'm going to give you is in GIS, and most people can't afford this program. But after the HOBAC, hopefully we're going to, in Sublette County, push all this out to our GIS viewer at the county level for our constituents. So right now, the people have to come to my office and we go through it. And this is an example of a point of diversion and means of conveyance and a place of use for a water right. And what we can do is, or you, if it was on the county server, would be able to do is click on the point of diversion. And then right now in this viewer, I got to click on this link and it brings up the certificate record for that water right, and or all water associated with that point of diversion, which depending on the size of the dish can be fairly large or fairly small. This one's fairly small and it shows you exactly the acres associated with it, the date of appropriation, the amount that's been appropriated, and so on. You can also pull up the original application map and you can see there, this is what you would pull if you're using ePermit. You can pull this up, look at your place of use, your map of the head gate in relation to the ditch, and it's a good tool for hopefully for the common or the general public, any landowner looking to buy ground, see what they currently have, utilize as a tool. So I'll turn it over to Mike to talk more about the design and show some of the differences in gathering the data to make this viewer go.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Commission, for giving us the time today. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this. Like Mike said, in the first place, the e-permit system is invaluable from my point of view in being able to access records. It's a great database. The one thing about it is if you don't use it all the time, it is fairly cumbersome to be able to navigate around to find what you're actually looking for. With a platform like this, it would give users an easier time to be able to search that information. I guess I'll just, in short, kind of give you an idea of how we went about this. As you can see on your screen there, there's some kind of beige looking color, amber colored polygons. That's basically what we receive from the e-permit when we do a water rights or a database search. it pulls in these polygons. And when you click on them, you understand that there is water rights within that aliquot part. So what we do, we just start out with the index. I guess in Sublette County, in Division 4, we've got a pretty recent update to the index. That's a good place to start, just because everything's done by tributary and by main stem streams. So we're able to look up all the permit numbers. We start our search index like that in the e-permit database and start pulling in all the adjudicated rights, the certificate records, the original application maps, which you use to proof those. And we start laying them out, and we run through it ditch by ditch. We take those application maps and do our best to, graphically depict how those water rights fall in each 40. So when you look at this on your screen, you can see where the actual place of use is versus, just saying, just every 40 acre parcel filled up. So we actually modify the place of use polygons in the GIS. We use aerial imagery to get the ditches aligned correctly, and also with the points of diversion. Then we go through the process of hyperlinking all the PDFs that we've downloaded from ePermit, so that you can just click on the place of use, the diversion, or the ditch to acquire the information for each. And it can be useful for a lot of different reasons, from a user standpoint or from a researching standpoint. If someone were to come in and ask Mike about a project on a specific project, he's able to access it more easily as well.
Yeah, so I guess with that quick rundown, it's a great tool for the landowners and the constituents within Sublette County that we're gonna push to get onto our county GIS viewer once we get the Hoback watershed study finished. It'll encompass the majority of our county and have the tool available to the users within our county. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if anybody's got any questions, me or Mike or Mabel or anybody else would be more than willing to answer them.
Good job. Good job, everybody, on that. That's a handy tool.
I got a question.
The state of Wyoming gets their money's worth out of us on that. Whoever put that together.
Chairman.
Any questions or comments for Mike or Mabel or anyone else?
Can you hear me, Chairman? This is Clint.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Glick.
Within your shape files of your permits, that blue line that's the ditch, right?
Correct. That's the means of conveyance. Yep.
Okay, and then within your polygon right here where it's enclosed, where it shows where that's irrigated, within that square 40, is there a way to figure out exactly how many true acres are within that polygon that are irrigable?
Yeah, if I understand that correctly, so we just froze the e-permit place of use, and there what you see now in the hard black boundary line, that's the actual place of use. That when you compare that to the application map, which is we pulled up here, that's basically how we trim that out from each 40 acres. And that's proofed against each certificate record as we go through. Obviously, when we draw these lines on these maps, from the ditch to an existing river course, your acreage isn't always going to match exactly. What we're not trying to do is replace the work of what a surveyor engineer would do in actually surveying, specific pieces and saying this is how many acres you have. We're simply trying to make it more realistic as to, the grounds that are covered. So I hope that answers your question there.
I was just looking to make sure that we're not gonna lose acres or whatever for maybe, I mean, it'd be good to increase but not lose.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess this is just a depiction. The black lines are a depiction. Where the rubber meets the road is going to be back on your certificate record, which is tied to the map that gives the actual acres. You can see right here, in the northeast of the Northeast, there's 10 acres. The 10 acres in the polygon here, if you were to measure that black line, it might be 10.2 because it's not a survey drawing, it's just a drawing based on aerial imagery. But when it comes to the actual water right, you would fall back to the state engineers. This is what they're going to fall back to, which is the certificate or the map. And so, like all county viewers, it's just a viewer, and there's all kinds of disclaimers about it's not survey grade, it's just the depiction.
So
Well,
kind
this
of
is
digitized, right?
Correct.
Okay.
well, and just to add to this, that this is Mabel, and when you do those downloads from the e-permit database, it will map to a quarter section. And even if the permitted acreage is only 10 acres, it's still going to map to that 40 acres. And so just based on that, they put, the town range section quarter, and that's what it's mapping based on. And so what Rio Verde and Sublette County has done on this has gone back to those original applications and mapped that actual acres to rather than it just being that generalized acreage.
I have one more question. Your projections, is this like state plane or that NAD, what is it, 83? And would a lot of these maps be useful in within different agencies, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's all defined in the watershed database, what the states put together, what coordinate systems to use. And it's transferable from program to program. As long as you deliver it and you state what coordinate system or what plane you're in, it can be modified and imported into a different system, as long as you define what you're delivering it in. And all these data sets will meld together in the state. The water development and the commission's done a great job in standardizing all that kind of information so that you don't have issues like that moving forward.
No, that's all I was asking. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You guys are doing a good job.
I agree, Clinton. I did a good job. Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Mike. Anything else to add to that?
No, I think we're good. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to show this, and we'll look forward to working with you guys hopefully on the HOBAC level 1 here in the near future.
That'll be great. So anything else, Brandon, on that?
Mr. Chairman, no, but I'd like to thank Mabel, Mike, and Mike for the nice presentation. Thank you.
Kudos. Yep. So we move on to item number 9.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This item, it's something that I'm going to repeat probably every year as long as I'm sitting in this chair. Coming up on the legislative session, I think it's important that the program continues to have a collective voice and to provide good responses when we're asked for information or data. So I've just asked that if at any time that you guys get approached for information or requests that maybe we run it by me or the office, just so we're all on the same board and we're all presenting the same information and just maybe help keep us out of trouble and none of us will get blindsided by that. So I just respectfully ask for that. Thank you.
That's good advice. There are lots of times when people wonder if they're going to have money for their particular project or whatever, and we need to be really careful about what we say because things are changing. That question was probably directed right towards me. Brandon was staring me down there.
Not intentionally, but if you're guilty, then yeah, I was.
I don't think I'm guilty, but I talk to a lot of people, so. Okay, thanks, Brandon. Let's be careful to make sure we have accurate information when we discuss it with others and or pass it through to Brandon so that it can go the right direction and have the right information. Bring some integrity to the Water Commission if we're always accurate. Item number 10, Brandon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going to provide some updates as much as I know about what's going on heading into the session. If you'll remember the last meeting, we discussed a aging infrastructure bill, draft bill that we would present to the Joint Ag Committee. We had that meeting and presented the concept to Joint Ag. And if I remember correctly, that bill died in committee with a tie vote. So it was 50-50 on that. So just provide an update on that. The next item that I want to talk about is level 1 and 2 application fees. In tab G of the notebook, and at the back of that tab is a draft bill. This was discussed at the last Select Water Committee meeting. I'm not surprised by this. It's kind of the direction that has been asked of all agencies, is to review fees and application fees, particularly the ones that are somewhat old, and look at updating those. You will also remember at the last meeting, we had some discussion on this. And at that time, I prepared a memo and a recommendation. And the first page under tab G of the E notebook, I have updated my recommendation to the commission. And it's based on some of the conversation we heard in our meeting as well as Select Water meeting. And so to boil this down, to amend the application fees, I will go out on a limb and say that whether the commission makes a recommendation to Select Water or not, I would anticipate that something's going to happen with our application fees. They even pretty much said so in their last committee meeting, but they also said that they would like for the commission to weigh in and provide this recommendation. So the updated recommendation in front of you today, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically what it boils down to, my recommendation would likely not require legislation to do it. State statute 41-118 AX II establishes the $1,000 application fee. That's the current application fee for level 1 and 2 studies right now. There's also a statute, and I believe it's also in our criteria, that the commission may ask for sponsors to reimburse costs for level 1 and level 2 projects. So using those two concepts, my recommendation to the commission would be to maintain the original application fee in statute 41-2118 of $1,000, but then to maybe amend our criteria such that we would develop a tiered structure for for reimbursement fees for sponsors for level 1 and 2 studies. And the way I've broken it out is that the small entities their reimbursement portion would be $1,000. And so that would be in addition to the $1,000 application fee. So in total, they would pay $2,000. A medium sized group would pay $2,000 in addition, or $3,000 total. And for a large group, $3,000 or $4,000 total. And I did provide some early analysis of what those breakdowns would be on the following sheet, or the following page. So tier 1, for a water system, we'd be evaluating it based on the number of taps that the system serves. So tier 1, the smaller group, would be less than 2,000 taps. Consequently, for irrigation system, we would look at irrigated acres. And for a tier 1, it would be less than 9,000 acres. Tier 2 for a water system would be between 2,000 and 9,000 taps. For irrigation, it would be between 9,000 and 20,000 acres. And tier 3 would be larger than 9,000 taps or larger than 20,000 acres. Be happy to have any discussion on that recommendation.
Any comments or discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm interested in what Commissioner Little has to think about this. He and I have been somewhat in link step about the need to do anything. I do look at the legislation, and basically it says
Shall not exceed.
Yeah. Shall establish an application fee not to exceed $3,500. So that leaves us the flexibility to decide if we want to do it or not. I was somewhat attracted to the step-by-step process that Brandon laid out. We could actually do that with the application fees.
Yes, that is correct.
The thing about that is, well, I don't know. Sheridan, you got anything to offer?
Well, my main concern has been from the beginning is the small little water district that has 40 taps and, needs some help with their water system. A developer came in and made them a crappy water system, and they're looking to fix it. And if we up the total thing for everybody to 3,500, I'm just afraid that that's going to turn a bunch of them away. And so this is going to turn into a program that is only for larger applicants, larger sponsors. So that's my concern with that. I'm interested in a tiered approach a little bit, where we can keep that fee down for those smaller folks. Because certainly, like City of Casper, City Sheridan, bigger towns like that, they can certainly afford a higher application fee, no problem. My biggest concern is with the smaller outfits. So I guess if we have to make a recommendation to the legislature, I kind of like that approach a little bit. So we can keep it down for the smaller sponsors, but I still don't feel like this is really solving any kind of problem. Really, I think this is an approach to try to make the state more money or something, but I don't think it's really going to make us much money. So I don't see it as solving anything there. I think it's just making the program harder and less accessible for sponsors, in my opinion. So I guess that's my feelings on it.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark.
Go ahead.
I agree with what Commissioner Purcell and Commissioner Little said. That we need to watch out for the smaller users, and although we're being directed everybody to pay their way and pony up some more money. So I mean, I'm for raising fees. I think I think the fee route is better than this reimbursement route. Just keep it simple. Let's not make it complicated and people are tracking costs, and it's a complication for everybody. But what Sheridan and Mike have said, I agree with. A tiered approach. If we got to raise it some. We don't have to go to the max. And I prefer the fee approach because I think it's simpler than the reimbursement type of strategy. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, if I may offer something to that point, I guess one of the ways I would see implementing this is that what we're calling the reimbursement, that would be due at the time of the application. So in practice, they're making that payment at the time of the application as well. So that's the caveat to that. I will throw out maybe something for consideration. I think one thing that gets lost when you start looking at these tier numbers, and Sheridan threw out an entity of 40 taps. Is there a desire, and I understand that it would create some extra work for the office and the commission, but would there be a desire to throw a caveat in there that the commission could, on an individual basis, waive the reimbursement fee?
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Go ahead.
I don't care how small they are, $1,000 is affordable. If they can't afford $1,000, they can't afford a project. But I kind of think it's Sheridan. This is probably a little bit, but we're not solving any particular problem other than a political problem.
Agreed.
The legislature said we should look at our application fees. Select Water Committee has suggested through their legislation, they've come to $3,500, but giving us some flexibility. And they're allowing us the opportunity to discuss that with them before they jump off that cliff. And I appreciate both those things. But in deference to our director, I kind of like just the straight application fee using the stepped process that he's laid out. But he could probably show me the error of my ways. I just thought that it would probably be more bureaucracy with the fees, or with the, what do you call them? The reimbursement than the fee. But I'll go either way on that.
And I have to agree with Mike. I don't want to waive the fees totally for anybody. I agree. I think if you can afford can't afford $1,000, you can't afford a project, and we're wasting our money on you. So, I mean, I think to keep people from just shotgunning us and asking for waived fees, I think we need to keep a fee there. I just want to don't want to make it inaccessible for people to even apply for the program,
Yeah.
I guess is my point. So I want that tier 1 to be relatively low, but not inaccessible.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, if I made Commissioner Purcell's point, I can easily change the recommendation, just to call it an application fee. The only difference would be that my proposal does not require any legislation, but I don't know that it's that big of a deal either way.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I think there's gonna be legislation. Just to show that we're doing it. And am I correct? Like the criteria changes that we're gonna make to small water projects, and this would require public hearings and a public process.
Mr. Chairman, I would say likely yes. The caveat may be though that if we're trying to address legislation, that maybe that would not require. Harry, do you have a thought?
We did on the last 45-day public comment period, but that's at the prerogative of the commission.
Yes, that is true. It is your prerogative.
Well, the point of it is, if we go with their legislation, 3,500, but we're gonna do that in a very specific way, I think you would probably have to do that. And I'm thinking that's a good thing.
It's certainly your prerogative.
Yeah. So right now, I guess I would go with the legislation offered by Select Water, but
Mr. Chairman,
Billy Mouth, Willie Warshy.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just have a few comments on this. And I guess number one is a question. How long have we had this $1,000 fee there in the past? Has it been there since inception of the Water Development Commission, or has it came at a later date?
Mr. Chairman, I think I've tracked it back to 1986.
It's quite a while. Without an inflation factor, I would agree that with that said, that we should have some increase somewhere in what we're doing. However, this Water Development Commission and the setup when it was originated was not to collect money, it was to deliver a purpose of supporting communities, public entities across the state of Wyoming. So, and I agree with a little bit that this money that we're going to get off these fees aren't going to make any difference to our balance sheet. It's going to be very minimal, even at the $3,500 max fee on that we're talking about today. With that, I would say that what we should do is take our fees the way they are today, increase them. If we haven't increased them for 25 years or 20 years, maybe it's time. A slight increase of some sort. I think you could use your table, but I don't know that that's right either by taps. I guess why should, just because they're a larger community, does it take more work to do an application for the city of Casper versus the town of Sundance? Or is it the same? And I think if you look at that, based on the application. And if that's what it's going to do is buy the paper and support a little bit of labor to do the application, then why are we charging more for another community and maybe less for another? I guess that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Larry. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think why I like the legislation is we have flexibility under the 3,500 to address this in March with the new commission. After the year, we'll know where Corona is. You know, at one time we were saying we didn't want to do anything until we figured out that we had life as usual, at least to the extent practicable. So I guess right now I'd prefer to go with the legislation. We will have with that complied blatantly, I guess, with the idea that we are willing to increase our fees, but it also provides us the flexibility to do what we think's right in applying those fees.
Okay, other comments? Everybody ready to vote on it tomorrow? Think about that.
Mr. Chairman, do we need a vote? I thought we have the co-chair on the phone. I see Senator Driscoll. Yeah, Mark's there.
Representative
So,
Larson.
yeah, I don't know. We were asked to discuss it. Does the members of the Select Water Committee think we've done that adequately? Or do you want a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Dan.
this is Representative Larson. I think we were hoping you would take this on and do it internally. And that way you would not, you know, it worries me, statutes. And so I would be concerned if I were you that if you could do it internally, at least you're guiding the ship. So I guess that would be my comment. I think that's what the Select Water was hoping.
I believe the difficulty is, though, that by statute we're limited to the $1,000 unless we do something like what Brandon was talking about. So, you know, I don't know. I guess
is correct.
I guess the one good thing about the bill that you guys have put together is that it, like Mike said, it gives us a little bit of breathing room and flexibility. So, I don't know.
Yeah. But I'm also interested in that input in the fact that I kind of felt that they wanted legislation. The Select Water Committee wanted legislation. If they don't, I'm more in favor of Brandon's approach.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Purcell, what I heard at the Select Water Committee is they want something done, but it was my understanding that if they didn't have to legislate it, they wouldn't, if they could agree to the commission's recommendation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that, and I personally think that would be the better choice, being a legislature. Opening, like I said, opening a bill up or a statute is pretty scary at these times.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
This is Mark. Just one more time, Mr. Chairman, a question for Director Gebhardt. The reimbursement, you see this, and my concern is just, you know, let's not make more work for people, you know, and tracking things and make an administrative nightmare. You wouldn't see it that way. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Cotton, no, I think this would be relatively straightforward. We get this information on the applications anyhow. We can just assign it to a tier and require that we could call it a reimbursement, and my recommendation would be to require that at the time of the application. So it acts as an application fee, even though statutorily it's something a little different and wouldn't require legislation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Go ahead.
our director's proposal says that we keep the application fee at $1,000. So what he's basically saying is we add to that this tiered system. Is that right?
That's Mr. Chairman, that's
So the small entities would be doubled. They would do an application fee of $100 and why can't I remember what the
reimbursement.
reimbursement of $1,000. So they'd be paying double. I don't think I have a problem with that, but I want to make sure everybody, when you're doing the math, you take Brandon's scale there and add $1,000.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess in short, for an application for tier 1 would cost $2,000. Application for tier 2 would cost $3,000, and application for tier 4 or tier 3 would cost $4,000. Depending on whatever you call it, but that would be the total application amount.
Any more discussion on that? We do want to avoid legislation. Dave,
yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to say I think that based on Representative Larson's comments, that we'd be wise to go with the tiered approach that Brandon's recommending, because it does avoid legislation, and I think it also raises revenue in a sense. Going back to Larry's comments about nothing be adjusted from inflation since 1986. So to me, that seems like a good route to go. It seems like we're addressing the needs that people feel to bring us more revenue, but we're also avoiding legislation. And I think we're being fair too, in the sense that smaller entities are going to have a different rate to pay than the larger entities do. Thank you.
Good comment, Commissioner Yankee. Other comments? Brandon has put a lot of thought and time into this, and Mike and Sheridan and everybody have added to it. I appreciate everybody's comments and your sensitivity to small districts and your need for maybe upgrade on fees. We've had a good discussion on this. Any other thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask a question of Representative Larson again. Representative Larson, what would the Select Water Committee like to see? Would they like a memo? Is my memo to the commission enough? What kind of formality would you like to see?
Mr. Chairman, I would say we would like a vote and a direction specifically tomorrow. I would think, or I would anticipate a bill will come. I hate to say it that way, but I think that is what the majority thinks. Does that answer?
Yes, I believe it does. There would be a motion tomorrow and formal action on it.
Would be appreciated.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Little, are you okay with the 2,000 for the small entities?
From how I understand it, I think that's, if they can afford 1,000, they can probably afford 2,000. I just didn't want to. I just wanted to voice my concern and make sure that we didn't make this program inaccessible to smaller sponsors. Is all, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, and maybe a question for Representative Larson. This recommendation, if it were to be successful and Select Water were to like it, it's likely that we would amend our criteria to incorporate that. So would Select Water be willing to wait? It'd probably be in the March meeting when that would be brought forward. And then it would be the process of the public comment, but so it would be further down the road before it would be actually implemented, but it would be, the promise would be made on Friday.
Mr. Chairman, would that take in effect next fall when applications come in then? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, applications are due in May. So just the timing of meetings would be tough to get it included prior to the next round of applications. March 1st. Applications for level 1 and 2 are March 1st. So we don't have another meeting until then to go through a public comment. So it would likely be the following year before we realize it.
Couldn't we do it in February?
What's that?
We don't have February meeting. Call a
Yeah.
special meeting if you want.
If we call it a special meeting, we can do this.
Well, it would be a,
We don't have
Mr. Chairman, we could have a public hearing absent the commission, can't we? Or does it generally have to be at a commission meeting? Where's our attorney?
Darren Cook, I don't know if you're hearing this conversation and if you have a suggestion.
I am, Mr. Chairman. We can look into that to see if we can conduct a special meeting. I mean, I'm not sure if we can get an answer before Friday.
That's fine. Do you, I think more importantly, are you sure that we need a public hearing on this? Public comment, yes, but public written comment?
To amend the operating criteria, I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Purcell. I can look into that and see exactly what is required to implement the process.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Purcell, I'm not convinced that we have, I think it's completely at the discretion of the commission if it goes to public comment.
Okay.
We can confirm that, but if that's the case, then we can amend rather quickly. Actually, changes in program criteria. If you give me a second, Mr. Chairman, I can maybe answer that.
Yes.
Criteria may be revised on a periodic basis to ensure water development program is serving Wyoming citizens in a responsible and efficient manner. The WWDC and the Director of Water Development Office may offer changes in the criteria. Proposed changes in the criteria shall be reviewed during the combined Select Water Committee WWDC meeting in August. During the August meeting, the proposed changes in criteria may be given preliminary approval or final disapproval. These proposed changes that are preliminary approved shall be reviewed by the public and may include a public hearing process. May.
Whoever wrote that was pretty wishy-washy.
Maybe you were having some scotch when you wrote that.
We just finished doing this process. Yeah, we just got done with this process. So I think it's worth us looking in and confirming whether we would have to go to public comment on criteria changes or not. And then hopefully we can maybe have an answer for Select Water on Friday.
That would be fantastic.
At the very least, tomorrow, we could make the motion subject to the review. subject to public input, or I don't know, we'll have to think about how we could do it. But while we're all at the table, to make your requirement, we need to take some sort of vote with a caveat.
I think so, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussions? We're just trying to put some verbiage together so we have the right thing to vote on tomorrow, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'm thinking it was very clear that the hearing is a May, but the public comment, maybe written public comment, could be done by the time we need it, by March 1st, but we'll let you ferret that out.
Yeah, we'll get on that as quick as we can.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everybody. We ready to move on?
Yes, we are.
Gillette Madison?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I bring this to your attention. We were asked by legislative committees to provide an update on the Gillette Madison pipeline project. Tab H is the update that we provided. I guess in short, one of the questions that I heard had to do with the loan amount, and I'm surmising that maybe that not everybody was aware that Gillette paid $40 million in September. And I think they're questioning how much outstanding loan we have. So our update really hits at that point and then provides the amount of work left to be done, what the appropriation is, and what we're estimating may be left over at the end of the project. I just wanted to give everybody an update on why we're doing that, and it was a request of one of the committees for us to prepare this. So I'm just sharing this information.
Appreciate that. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, what's the bottom line on potential reversions?
We're estimating right now 29 million.
Okay, there, I got it.
19 to the state. Help me, Brian. 19 would come back to the state, and 9 million would be the city's portion.
Okay. Estimated final completion budgets. Is that the same as reversions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions, I'll move on to agency budget reductions.
Okay, yes, let's do, sorry.
Okay. Again, this is informational to the commission. Going through these step 1, 2, and 3 budget reductions for the state. As everybody's aware, our funding source makes us play in that game a little differently. So what we have prepared is an explanation of what we have been doing to participate in budget reductions, even though we have not been formally asked. There's some strategy behind this. I'm just assuming that we're going to be asked to participate at some point anyhow. Plus, I think it's wise of us to have implemented these already. Some of these reductions started even when I got here with some open positions that I did not fill, or that we did not fill, and then hiring freeze put on those positions anyhow. So the whole thing kind of played together. So we're really looking at not filling 2 vacant positions in the office, reducing our Series 900 budget. Part of that is outside contract services. And one of the other things we're doing is we are negotiating with the landlord. We're trying to see if we can inhabit just half of our office, move everybody upstairs, and we would vacate the basement that I think we're currently use about 3/4 of it, but we would just all move upstairs and get a little cozier. So we did provide this to the JAC so that they're aware that we are playing the game.
Wow. Appreciate you thinking that through, and that's quite a heavy deal to deal with there. Any comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director, who does the negotiations with the owner of the building?
Mr. Chairman, I made the initial contact, but the actual negotiation will be done through the Department of A&I and the leasing program. It's actually their lease. It's in our name, I believe, but they are in charge of all state leases.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe I have one more update for the commission. We've been asked to, and there's no handouts for this. This just recently occurred. We've been asked to look into a contract that we have with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities for storage water in Seminole. And I believe I'm asked to present on that select water on Friday. So giving you all the update on what we've learned. We had a good conversation with the Board of Public Utilities. We told them what was behind this, and really what our agreement is with them is we have a certain percentage of the water of excess stage 2 water that the commission can market. Looking back at the history of that, some has been marketed and leased, but within the last several years, nothing has been done on that. The cost is fairly high in that, but also as part of that agreement, the commission has to pay storage fee O&M in Seminole. And that's to the tune of about $25,000 a year. And I'm just looking back at some of the history of it, I surmise that the whole thing was set up as some sort of a security for the construction of stage 2 and then kind of morphed. Do you have something to say to that?
Yes.
Okay.
When back in the 80s, when the funding for the stage 2 project came into place, the city of Cheyenne, of course, was the primary benefactor. And the Natrona County and the people on the North Platte were nervous about it all. So the initial disagreement was put in place so we could provide emergency water to North Platte municipalities in the case it was needed, case of regulation or whatever, when if it was basically a contingency fund and contingency water for an emergencies of North Platte communities from Casper to Torrington, if you will. Plus, there was the opportunity for us to market the water to industry or ag, but the contracts were typically only 1 year. But so it was all part of that huge negotiation back in funding stage 2. Now that we have the Pathfinder modification project and we have an emergency supply that the state owns, we don't really need this anymore. So I would support the efforts to get rid of it. But that's the background. It's got quite a legacy. And we never did sell a heck of a lot of water from it. I think Cheyenne from time to time sells water and we get part of it for dust abatement, construction, things like that. But the reality of it, it's a financial loser, one we were willing to take to make the Natrona County or the North Platte municipals feeling secure that if they had a problem, we could solve it. But we have that now with Pathfinder, and this is no longer needed. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Sorry. Any questions from the commissioners? Any more thoughts about this? Brandon's done a lot of work on this and feel to support him, how he's got this headed in the direction he's got this headed.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
What would this look like then moving into the future if we dissolve the agreement or whatever? What does that look for, let's say, Cheyenne's water?
It remains Cheyenne's water without the caveat that they have to share it with us.
So we would just abandon our side of it and nothing else would change.
That's right. What this does is it's a storage account that collects minimum flow releases from Hog Park Reservoir. And then if Cheyenne needs it through exchanges, they can move it back up into Rob Roy.
So they would still be able to do those moves in the future if they needed to?
This will not affect their operation one bit.
It would just save us $25,000 a year.
Yes.
Yeah, seems like a no-brainer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in our discussions with the BOPU, they said, yeah, it's a financial hit, but it's nothing we're not willing to take on, and they would continue with the storage contract in Seminole, and they would just continue on and pick up this additional money that we're contributing. So they were fine with it. Well, maybe not fine, but they'd be agreeable to it.
Well, sounds good.
Thanks for your comments, everyone. Any other thoughts? Back to Brandon. Are we done?
So tomorrow you can ask the authority to do this with the commission slip one.
I need to look at the contract and see if it's commission or office contract.
Okay.
I
think it's commission.
It may take legislation. It will, because in legislation it's through 2036. So I think we can ask Select Water to amend that bill and just change the date to 2021.
But if it's a May contract or shall. Okay.
So we may have to, however we get whatever we need from the commission to ask Select Water to amend it, then I think we'll have to do that.
Okay.
If that's what Select Water chooses to do.
Okay. What's next?
Mr. Commissioner, I've been shuffling and I'm out of paper, so I think we're done.
We've had quite a discussion this afternoon. Our minds have been worked and stretched.
And I do want to say, I appreciate all the discussion. Some of these have not been easy on our end, and this discussion is helpful. Thank you.
I appreciate the open-mindedness of the commission. It's a great thing. Tomorrow we need to get a good night's rest and be fresh and ready to go. 8:30 a.m. Do I have to have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Commissioner Kaylee.
Don't believe you do, actually.
On the workshop.
You can just smack the gavel.
I smacked it. I don't know how to smack it.
Take your shoe off and hit the table.
Done.
Punch your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Tomorrow.
Don't you have?
Thanks, bye.
Everybody tomorrow.
Isn't there some water in Glendo too?
We're set. We don't need this anymore.
Right, that's what I
And
meant.
the other question, don't leave, Brian.
Shut this off.